Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on ransomware risks in healthcare. My name is Delaney Adams, and I'm LogRhythm's digital marketing specialist. I'm just going to go over two quick housekeeping items before I hand things over to our speakers. Firstly, we would love to hear any questions that you have throughout the presentation, so feel free to drop them in the Q&A section at any time, and we'll get to them at the end. And then secondly, be sure to take a look at the attachments section on the right-hand side. We've included some free resources for you there, so you can check them out there, and they will be available after the webinar wraps up as well. And that is everything that I have. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our speakers.
Hello. My name is Gabrielle. I am a customer solutions engineer here at LogRhythm. Been here for about a year. Before that, worked in various roles in both cybersecurity and in healthcare. So excited to get to chat with you all today about ransomware.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mikiann McIntosh. I am a risk and compliance engineer here at LogRhythm. I work within our labs department and essentially also have a background working in, risk management and vulnerability management. So excited to go over some key talking points in regards to ransomware and what to do. Okay. So first, we're going to go and start by setting the scene. We're going to talk about the recent attacks that happened in healthcare, transition into talking about industry example. Then we're going to demonstrate a HIPAA dashboard on our Axon platform, talk about a reporting mechanism that we can use through Axon in regards to ransomware. Then we'll talk about Axon's partnership with a health organization. And then lastly, we'll end out by talking about security best practices. So when we talk about the various attacks that occur to a hospital, there are a ton of high-risk variables that can proceed. One of the top leading contributors to that high-risk variable is ransomware. Now, remember, ransomware is a type of malicious software used by cybercriminals to encrypt a user or organization's digital data to block access until a ransom demand is met. So in recent years, ransomware attacks have become more sophisticated and increasingly more common, causing significant damage to an organization. With ransomware taking advantage of human errors, software vulnerability, technology, and various networks, adopting the right tools and techniques can help strengthen your security posture. So the average total cost of ransomware attack is approximately $4.5 million, compromising a health facility's financial stability. On average, it takes approximately 49 days or more to identify. Oh, did we lose our screen? Is it still showing up?
No, it looks like your screen share went black for some reason.
Hold on, let me end it and reshare it. Hold on. That's weird. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Let me duplicate that. Bring it back onto this screen. Minor technical issues, but we're getting there. And now let me go back to screen sharing. Okay, are we back on track?
We are.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, just circling back. All right, so on average, it takes approximately 49 days or more to identify and remediate a ransomware breach, thus eroding patient trust. And ransomware-induced downtime can paralyze ER operations, causing operational, disruptions, treatment delays, and increased patient wait times. Vulnerabilities in Internet of Things devices, including smart infusion pumps, wearable monitors, remote patient systems, can expose patient data to unauthorized access and cyber threats. So these records are valuable to hackers because the data that can be used and manipulated in a lot of ways, such as falsifying medical claims, prescriptions, or even treatment. And then lastly, due to unavailable technologies and manual necessities, the risk of HIPAA violations it increases exponentially, right? Ransomware encrypts files and data on compromised systems, rendering them inaccessible to authorized users. And HIPAA security rule requirements stipulate that healthcare organizations must ensure the availability and integrity of PHI. So the loss of access to critical patient information due to ransomware attacks not only disrupt patient care, diagnosis, and treatment, but also jeopardizes compliance with HIPAA standards. Alrighty. So, in recent news, the largest health insurance company, commonly known within the United States, became victim of ransomware. Right. So, the United Healthcare subsidiary Change Healthcare fell into a ransom attack on February 21st of 2024. So, just last month. So, overall, let's make sure that we're all aware that Change Healthcare is a health tech giant, right? And it's one of the country's largest processors of prescription medications, where they handle 67,000 pharmacies across the United States healthcare system, as well as process 15 billion healthcare transactions annually. So the cyber attack caused a widespread outage at pharmacies and healthcare facilities, causing Change Healthcare to take its systems offline to expel the hackers from its systems. And currently, most of its customer-facing systems remain offline to today. Hospitals, healthcare providers, and pharmacies across the United States have reported that they were and currently are unable to fulfill or process prescriptions through patients' insurance. It was confirmed that the cyber criminal responsible for this attack is none other known as Black Hat or ALPHV, which is one of the most notorious ransomware gangs on the internet. So the full nature of the attack has not yet been disclosed. However, based on ongoing investigation, there's no indication that, except for the Change Healthcare systems, Optum, United Healthcare, and United Health Group systems have been affected by the issue, which is, nice to know. So ransomware attacks are increasingly happening as we speak. So, in conjunction to what occurred last month, there were several ransomware attacks that took place in 2023. But one that stood out to be debilitating was the Prospect Medical ransomware attack. So the Los Angeles-based private equity company, Prospect Medical Holdings, operates a total of 16 hospitals across California, Texas, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Pennsylvania. And the ransomware attack that occurred in 3 of Connecticut's hospital locations include Manchester Hospital, Rockville General, and Waterbury, which resulted in the shuttering of several emergency departments and required ambulances to divert from certain hospitals, while health providers reverted to pen and paper in the immediate aftermath of the attack. The entire attack left these health facilities with a 6-week outage. Could you imagine? 6 weeks. So a review of the records showed that these facilities had to cancel nearly half of their elective procedures. And at the time, during this 6-week period, X-rays and CT scans were unable to be processed, which is super vital for testing potential stroke or heart attack victims. And that includes, multiple services, including urgent care and elective surgeries, were unable to be processed during the restoration period. Doctors shared that approximately 50% of elective surgeries had to be postponed during the attack. So a lot of patient care processes were forced to become, manual during the outage and the lack of digital automation. So now we ask the question, who was responsible for this life-threatening attack? Well, the cyber criminals became known as Reseda, and Reseda listed Prospect as one of its victims on its, dark website, claiming that it had stolen 1 terabyte worth of unique files and 1.3 terabyte of 1.3 terabyte size SQL database, right? So ransomware gangs will often post the names of their victims on their sites to make the targets look bad and apply pressure in ongoing ransom payment negotiations. And these ransomware hackers often exaggerate, or they even misrepresent the amount and significance of the data they stole. So it's not always credible to believe they're given threatening numbers. So this incident is a firm reminder that cybersecurity threats pose a real-life risk to healthcare operations across the nation. So now we're going to transition into talking about an industry example, and Gabrielle's going to go ahead and give us details on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Mikiann. So yeah, just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into some of the technical details and timeline of one of the attacks that occurred as well. This one I was a little bit older. It happened in 2018. It was Cass Regional Medical Center. And it's an example of a breach that was handled really, really well, by the medical center. And there were still some pretty hefty ramifications. So just serves as a good reminder that things can happen and kind of what that timeline would look like in a really good scenario. So July 9th, 11 a.m. in 2018, Cass Regional Medical Center became aware of a ransom attack on its information technology infrastructure. So a lot of, it looked like it was a brute force attack on their remote desktop protocol. And a lot of those affected areas included internal communication systems and access to the electronic health records. So at the time of that discovery, there wasn't any evidence that patient data had been breached yet, but as an extra precaution, Meditech, who was the vendor for the electronic health records, opted to shut down the system until that attack was resolved. So Cass Regional initiated its prepared incident response just 30 minutes after discovering the attack, which if you've done anything with incident response, you'll know that that's a super fast response. And that allowed the health system to maintain care for most of their patients. However, they did choose to divert trauma and stroke victims, so some of the really critical care needing patients, to other facilities just to make sure that they received the best care. So that was July 9th, around 11:30. So from July 9th, from that time on to the 16th, they began their investigation. So they investigated that impact on patient data to make sure that it was all looking good, and also hired an external forensics firm to perform some of that file decryption as well. So 8 days after the attack, so on July 16th, they...
Ooh, sorry about that.
Oh, you're all good. They brought their electronic health record system back online. So 8 days, some of those really critical care patients had to be diverted. Patient care was only then fully restored. So officials haven't confirmed the type of ransomware that was used, but they did confirm that it was a brute force attack on their remote desktop protocol. Just a little background on RDP. It's widely used to give remote access for legitimate business purposes, but like any legitimate business purpose, it can also be abused for illegitimate things. So a hacker can use that port to jam ransomware into a network. A lot of times they'll use a trial and error method as well to decode encrypted passwords or find other encryption keys. So using that brute force methodology as well. So a lot of times a lack of that robust RDP security, like when users have simple logins and passwords, can make even a legitimate port like RDP a vulnerability. And as someone who's done a lot of auditing and work in hospitals and things along those lines, I can absolutely confirm a lot of times you want those easy logins to try and be able to access systems in a hurry. Obviously, time is of the essence in medical centers, but that can also lead to a lot of insecurity in the environment. So for the future, they have worked on their contingency plan and also modified the system. I know implementation of multi-factor authentication was also discussed as well, and that's usually a huge thing to help make it a little bit harder for attackers to execute some of these attacks, especially on those vulnerable usernames and passwords and things along those lines. So let's do a post-mortem in that next slide. Awesome. So some takeaways from this. These attacks are really, really fast spreading. I mean, that was an example of an organization that handled it super well. They initiated their response within 30 minutes of discovery. It didn't look like the attacker had been sitting in the system for very long, but the reality is that critical data can be encrypted or changed very quickly, which can lead to patient decisions that are dangerous or even deadly. Your modern healthcare systems are very interconnected. Your average medical center will have electronic health records, which store those patient medical histories, their treatment plans, lab results, and medication records. And that is the heart of the operation in a lot of ways. So your telemedicine platforms, your diagnostic and imaging equipment like MRI and CT scanners, your lab information systems, pharmacy management systems, patient monitoring systems, billing and insurance claim systems, and mobile health applications all often integrate back to those electronic health records. So there are also the tools that are used for hospital administration and resource management and security and access controls that are part of that ecosystem as well. So any of these systems that are impacted, but especially those electronic health records, can really impact that emergency response. All right. So what can we do about it? LogRhythm Axon is our new SaaS offering here at LogRhythm. Just wanted to highlight, so I, having the background in healthcare, created a HIPAA dashboard to try and visualize some of these things that maybe that HIPAA rule tries to enforce. So you can see here, we've got a couple of different visualizations. There's one that looks for unique user identification. 164.312D requires procedures in place to verify authentication activities. So you can see that there as well. We have a portion that requires transmission security management. So that is visualized. You can also see 164.312E21 requires integrity controls and monitoring of that unencrypted traffic. So making sure that files haven't been altered or anything along those lines is a really big portion of what we want to see in a dashboard that shows what we're looking for, and that pertains to the HIPAA rule. We also want to monitor confidential and protected information. So you can see that there's a portion that does that. There are also the MITRE portion is pertaining to 164.308A5, which requires that there are security standards that are implemented. So MITRE is a really good way to keep an eye on things and kind of standardize some of those attacks or vulnerabilities that you might see. We also, the one that I was very excited about was 164.312A24. And that is the portion that is looking for PHI in raw logs. And that's kind of the bread and butter, I think, of the HIPAA dashboard. That part of the standard involves addressable encryption and decryption. And this specifically is looking for raw logs that contain information that meet the definition of PHI. So anything that might be in a raw log that's not encrypted, you'll see in that visualization. And then finally, 164.312A1, wanting to see an access control standard. So you can see here, there's service accounts and showing some of those access to service accounts as well for electronic information systems. So this dashboard is part of something you can add to your Axon offering if you're an Axon user, or if you're interested, happy to get in touch with the team. But yeah, just trying to make it easier to kind of stay in touch with those HIPAA standards and start visualizing those areas to make it easier to respond to some of these incidents as well. So now I'm going to pass it over to Mikiann. She's going to talk a little bit about MITRE ATT&CK art and ransomware reporting that you can do in Axon as well.
All right. Thank you, Gabrielle. So now let's talk about the benefits of generating logs processed from ransomware activities and how to export the same in a report through Axon. So we can do this by applying what's known as the ART technique. So ART stands for Atomic Red Team, and that is a library of tests that every security team can execute to simulate adversarial activity and validate their defenses. So now I'm going to demonstrate how to run a test specific to ransomware using the top 3 MITRE attack tactics and search for those logs within one query and generate a report per that ransomware test through Axon. So now, just to make sure we're all clear, right? The top 3 MITRE attack tactics used for ransomware are as follows. We have inhibit system recovery, T1490, Windows management instrumentation, T1047, and then command and scripting interpreter, T1059. So T1490 is a tactic involving the prevention or interference with the restoration or recovery of our system to a previous state, typically after, a security incident or system compromise. So attackers may attempt to disable or manipulate system recovery mechanisms such as system restore points, backup systems, or recovery tools to maintain persistence or evade detection. And then for T1047, that's a management framework built within the Windows operating system for performing administrative tasks and monitoring system resources. So in the context of cyber attacks, adversaries may abuse the Windows management instrumentation functionality to execute malicious code, gather system information, or remotely control compromised systems. And then lastly, T1059 is a tactic that involves the use of command line interfaces and scripting interpreters to execute commands and run scripts on compromised systems. And adversaries may leverage command line interfaces such as command prompt or PowerShell, as well as scripting languages like Python or JavaScript to perform various actions like lateral movement, privilege escalation, and data exfiltration during the course of a cyber attack. So let me go ahead and show you a live demonstration or a video of how exactly we run one of these tests. So for the sake of time, I'm only going to demonstrate how to run an ART test for T1490 and how we use the logs, how it's generated within Axon, and then demonstrate how to generate a report through Axon. All right, so it looks a little bit blurry, but as I play it, it'll kind of clear up. So first off, we're going to go into the library on GitHub. It's stored there. And we're going to scroll down to do a test. So we're going to click onto the first test here, which is to delete a volume shadow. And we're going to check the prerequisite command, right? So we're going to copy that. And since we're on a Windows machine, we're going to use PowerShell. Okay. Run as an admin. We're going to click yes. And we're going to paste it and execute it. Oh, nice. So now we're going to test the actual attack command. So we're going to copy the attack command here. And then we're going to go into command prompt and we're going to run it as an admin. Click yes. Paste and execute. And this is actually going to run that first minor attack tactic. So we're doing this for all three. I'm only showing one for the sake of time, as I mentioned. So now we're going to search for this in Axon. So we're going to enter the command search. We're entering specifically the attack command in Axon. We're going to search for the log, see if it matches our search criteria, and it does. So we're going to look for the log source and the process command line. Okay, and we found it. So now we're going to go over to our visualizations tab and change some of our widgets. So we're going to change this to vendor message ID. Scroll down, vendor message ID, apply that, then change to this widget to the command line. Perfect. We're going to hover over to show the entire command. All right, so now I just showed you exactly how to run an ART test. So now I'm going to show you how exactly do we generate a report per those three tactics. All right, so we're going to search all three using one query. And you can always find information on how to run queries with the specific language and our knowledge base page for Axon. All right, so we have all the logs and analytics. So we're going to go into our visualizations tab and modify some of the widgets again. So we're going to display the common event. Hit apply. Likewise, change these widgets on the left. We want to display the process command line again. Then we're going to change the widget to display the script command line. Change it from the pie to the bar. Change this widget to process name. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want these specific widgets in our report. Change this to process path. All right, perfect. So we're just going to resize these two bars just so that it's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. You can see what we're working with. Perfect. So now we're going to go ahead and save our search. We go ahead on the right top, save search. We're going to name it. So as you can see here, these are the 3 queries that we were able to put in one that has a specific attack command. So let's go ahead and name our report. Okay. Confirm. Now we're going to export this in a PDF format. All right, give it a name. And we want to click grids results and visualizations because that's specifically what we want to see in our report. Okay, give it a name. Matter attack art. Export. Perfect. So now let's see what our report looks like, right? Ta-da! Okay, so we can see our search criteria, the date, and you know, the time span and the report when it was created. So here we can see the metadata, right, that was generated. We see the filter queries and the specific widgets that we just went over, the top common events, the top process paths, right? Process command lines that were used. We can see the logging details, you know, we can see the raw message, the standard time, the common events, log sources, the target host specifically. And we can also see the analytic detections, right? The outputs of the analytic detections. So there's a lot of information that we can basically configure via our report using Axon during our investigation in the case of a ransomware detection. So that's one of the ways and benefits of having, you know, Axon in this context, because we're able to use the art tactic to, you know, test for ransomware, do, you know, as we would in a security team, and then show exactly the type of data that we can aggregate via our report. All right, perfect. All right, so we displayed a live demonstration of how Axon would be used for a reporting standpoint in the event of a ransomware detection. So now let's talk about Axon's partnership with a health organization. So we talked about the ransomware landscape in the US, but ransomware crosses borders, right? The threat landscape in Europe is currently experiencing rapid growth, with more organizations being featured in headlines after falling victim to sophisticated attacks. So amongst these organizations, the healthcare industry, as you know, is one of the biggest targets for threat actors due to highly confidential data that it's responsible for, as we mentioned in previous slides. So that brings LogRhythm into the conversation. LogRhythm has partnered with the health organization known as the Health Informatics Service, also known as THIS, which is an innovative, collaborative NHS organization that provides digital and IT services to transform healthcare security in the UK. So Axon's goal here in this partnership is to continue to demonstrate its ability to provide security teams the support to stop breaches from turning disconnected data and signals to trustworthy insights. So the organization, gains a flexible security solution that minimizes expenses and provides a simple platform design for security teams to identify threats. So Axon's increasing adoption in Europe is strengthening enterprises' hybrid IT security postures within the region and enhancing the analyst experience with complete visibility into networks and network threats, right? So it's 100% cloud native security, provides cost-efficient security solutions without the operational complexities. So now we're going to talk about security best practices from a human standpoint. So we have some stats here, right? And so 96% of all security breaches take place due to human error. 44% of all targeted cyber attacks are laid on employees through emails, right? And 24% of data breaches occur due to employee negligence or unawareness. And 41% of the C-suite executives believe that human error is a primary cause of data breach. So how do we combat these stats, right? We combat them by fostering a culture of security awareness and accountability throughout the entire healthcare organization to minimize the risk of security incidents and safeguard patient trust and confidence in healthcare services. So this comes with a combination of policies and procedures, training, and technology solutions, which we'll go over in the next slide. So you start off by having a comprehensive security awareness training program. So in that, you would provide regular security awareness training to all healthcare staff. That's including clinicians, administrators, and any staff support. So training should cover, topics such as phishing awareness, password hygiene, data handling procedures, and incident reporting protocols. And then you want to ensure strong password policies. So you do that by enforcing strong password policies that require employees to create complex passwords like passphrases and using multi-factor authentication where possible. And avoid using password reuse across multiple accounts. I know it's tempting to use the same password and everything that you use. My memory is not the best, so I tend to do that too sometimes, but you want to make sure that it is different, because if one system of yours is hacked using that password, that means all systems are inevitably at risk and of exploitation. So you want to have multiple variations of passwords and passphrases in this context. And then you want to ensure that you have regulatory compliance and audits. So you stay up to date with healthcare regulations such as HIPAA, as Gabrielle was talking about, and the HITECH Act, and conduct regular audits and assessments to ensure compliance with regulatory requirements and industry best practices are in order. So now let's talk about the technical elements when it comes to security best practices.
Thanks, Mikiann. So yeah, I am about to get on my soapbox, and we're going to talk about some of your technical security best practices you can do to help yourself, stay safe from ransomware or respond well to ransomware. So more statistics for you. Recent studies have shown that the most common initial access vectors are compromised credentials, which accounts for 32% of breaches, followed closely by exploited vulnerabilities, which represents 29%. So over half of your initial access vectors are those two things, essentially. So one really effective strategy, I think, to mitigate the risk of that unauthorized access and lateral movement with the networks is the principle of least privilege. This concept essentially involves providing users and systems only the access and permissions that they absolutely need to perform their roles or tasks and no more. So by doing that, even if an attacker compromises a set of credentials, the impact is really minimized because you're restricting their movement across your environment. For this, some of your best practices, I think, are regular access reviews. So conduct periodic reviews of some of those user access rights. Make sure that they align with the user's current job roles and their responsibilities. And this will really help you to identify and revoke unnecessary permissions that might accumulate over time, because, someone always needs access to something and you give it to them, and then maybe they don't always need it, and it sits for a while, and then suddenly that becomes a vector for attack, or a vector for lateral movement at the very least. You also want to implement your role-based access control, so your RBAC. Define those roles within your org, assign permissions to those roles rather than to individual users. This helps, one, make your job a little bit easier, because you're not just giving each person very specific permissions, but you're essentially just assigning them a role that has very specific permissions. It'll make everything a lot easier on you, the user, and make things a little bit harder for an attacker. So it'll make everything a little bit more scalable, less prone to error. You're not giving people access to things that they might not need on accident. Finally, you want to automate that enforcement of least privilege. So use automated tools when you can to manage and enforce those policies across your organization, so you're not constantly having to go back in and assess whether people need certain access to things. This minimizes the risk of human error, which we know is a big part of your breaches, like Mikiann just said, and it really ensures that consistent application of those security policies. The fact that 29% of your initial access is gained through exploited vulnerabilities really highlights the importance of keeping software and systems up to date too. One of my favorite pieces of advice is patch what you have, right? So regularly applying your patches and updates isn't just about getting access to the cool new features that they have. It's usually pretty critically important to security as well. It fixes known vulnerabilities, protects against exploitation. So some of your best practices in this area are to adopt a patch management policy, outline how and when patches are to be applied. This should also involve you prioritizing some of the patches that need to be maybe applied first based on some of the severity of vulnerabilities and the criticality of the systems that they affect. You also want to, again, automate where you can. So automate patch deployment. Where it's possible, use automated systems for that deployment of patches to make sure that they're applied promptly and consistently, reducing that window of opportunity for attackers, and also keeping you from having to do everything manually. You also want to test your patches before deployment to make sure that they either don't introduce new vulnerabilities or break things that you have. And then finally, monitor for new vulnerabilities as well. You want to make sure that you're staying informed and that you're subscribing to vulnerability databases, security forums, and security bulletins for any vendors that you might use. Finally, identity and access management is a really crucial piece, I think, to making sure that your environment is secure. So those IAM controls help ensure that your individuals have the correct access to appropriate resources at the right times for the right reasons. So that includes multi-factor authentication to protect against compromised credentials, access reviews, and just centralized function for that kind of thing. So you want to use multi-factor authentication. So your MFA is going to add an additional layer of security. Mentioned this a little bit earlier with some of the RDP breach stuff as well, but it requires 2 or more verification methods. So really significantly reduces that risk of unauthorized access. You also want to centralize your IAM functions. So use a centralized IAM system to manage user identities and access across all of your systems, and kind of provide you a single point of control and visibility into access rights within the org. You want to implement some strong password policies as well. So enforce the policies that require strong, complex passwords and make sure that they're changed regularly. So educate your users on the importance of using unique passwords for different services. So again, kind of like Mikiann said, don't use the same password for everything. And then finally, regularly auditing and monitoring those controls. So similar to the principle of least privilege, make sure that you're kind of monitoring who has access to what and revoking access when needed. But the number one thing that I harp on all the time when someone comes to me and says, hey, how do I protect myself against ransomware? You can do everything right and still be hit by ransomware. And the thing is you need to have a contingency plan. And the number one thing that I like to stress when it comes to ransomware is that you need to have backups. The primary purpose of your backups is to enable data recovery in the event of data loss, whether due to hardware failure, human error, or ransomware. So by restoring that data, you can resume operations without having to have too much downtime, which is really, really important and critical in the healthcare industry. You can also avoid the cost of paying the ransom. It kills a little bit of my soul every time I see organizations pay ransom, and I understand that sometimes that's what you have to do. But if you have a really robust backup system, that can lessen your chance of having to do so. So paying ransoms is not only discouraged by a lot of government agencies, but it's also really financially burdensome. Millions of dollars. I mean, I think most organizations don't really just have that sitting around waiting to give it to attackers. So backups can potentially eliminate your need to pay ransom and save a lot of dollars. So some of your backup best practices. You want to regularly schedule these backups, make sure they're backed up at frequent intervals, and minimize that data loss. You also want to follow the 3-2-1 backup rule. Maintain at least 3 copies of data on 2 different types of media, with 1 copy stored offsite or in the cloud. So there is a lot of ransomware that does target backups at this point, because attackers are smart and they're going to go after whatever they can get. So you want one that's not part of your system, not reachable, and in case of emergency, break this glass, right? So you want to also test your restore procedures. I can't think of a worse scenario than having backups and not being able to bring them back online in case of an emergency. So make sure that you can test that, ensure that it can be restored, and make tweaks as necessary. And then finally, secure those solutions. Protect your backup copies from ransomware attacks, encrypt them, use tamper-proof storage solutions, isolate them from the main network. You're in good shape if you can do all that. So with that, I think I will get off my soapbox now and hand it over to Q&A. So any questions that we might have, I know we've seen a couple come in. So yeah, I think one looks like it's for you, Mikiann, with the atomic red team reporting function that you showed. Is that something that's specific to healthcare, or can someone in any industry utilize that function on Axon as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So definitely the art technique is for any industry, right? So it's the main purpose is to test for specific, very sophisticated cyber attacks, like in this context, ransomware. And it can be used around any type of industry. It doesn't have to only pertain to healthcare. And of course, for the purposes of all the information that we discussed in today, it's super critical to have these types of tests to see how, how durable your detection and preventative systems are in the case of, patient data, etc. So definitely the art technique, it is applicable to any type of industry, but it's definitely highly recommended to replicate the same within the healthcare industry.
Awesome. It looks like we had another question from Stefan Gunther, and I think it's a really good question. I had to go back and double check. So he asked, when I was showing the Axon dashboard that I had built for HIPAA, with this type of dashboard, what are the driving log sources? And that's a really good question. So I went back and double checked. It looks like we have a ton of log sources. There are some Carbon Black. There's a lot of Palo Alto, because I know that's what we're using with that platform. There's a lot of like Microsoft security logs in there as well. So really any type of log that you want to bring in, we can do that. I know specifically Okta was on there as well, just for some of the multi-factor, but not trying to show Axon or anything, but there is a really cool like log parser feature with Axon. So it's pretty easy to bring in any type of logs that you want and normalize them really easily. So lots of different cool functionalities there in the Axon platform, and different types of logs that you can bring in as well. Mikiann, I think there was another question for you as well, specifically surrounding, let me see what it said. How can an organization stay ahead of emerging ransomware threats? Do you have any input there?
Yeah, so organizations should stay informed about emerging ransomware threats and cybersecurity trends, participate in threat intelligence sharing initiatives, collaborations in like industry partners and law enforcement agencies is definitely effective when it comes to addressing these evolving threats. So definitely staying informed on, in different conferences and news, etc. Perhaps even enrolling in different newsletters to ensure that you're up to date with all the recent news that's happening in the cyber threat world. I know that the threat that happened to United Healthcare is something that went widespread with throughout newsletters. So just subscribing to one of those newsletters alone can help efficiently in that. And keeping up to date to the recent or ongoing ransomware threat that's happening in the cyber threat world. Let's see. Oh, Gabrielle, I think there's a question. I don't know if we went over this one. Is there a repo of popular saved searches as we access as Axon customers? Is that something you can speak on?
Yeah, I am double checking right now, but I do believe in the, I'm not sure if it's part of the shareables or part of the community or not, but I know on LogRhythm community, there are a lot of resources that you can use for both Axon and on-prem LR7 if you have that as well, to implement different things. But I believe that there are either searches that you can access, or you can even ask if you are an Axon customer, definitely talk to your customer solutions engineer, and they can help you come up with a couple of different save searches, or see what we might have on hand as well to access as those Axon customers. So I believe there are quite a few. I'm not sure if they're part of community just yet, but definitely a resource that we want to continue to share with you as well.
Okay. I know we have another question. What are some post-incident steps organizations should take after a ransomware attack? So after a ransomware attack, organizations should conduct a thorough post-incident analysis to identify vulnerabilities and weaknesses within their systems, anything that looks to be exploitable, and improve the incident response procedures in that context, and then implement additional security controls to prevent future attacks. It's easier said than done, but it is a process to be said, and there are a lot of lessons to be learned. So it's critical to note down all of the lessons learned, and that will make the organization a more advanced, quote unquote, treat to adversarial attackers. So in the case of anything being, suspicious, or anyone trying to exploit the systems again, it would be a lot more harder for them, because things would be in complex formats based on lessons learned.
Awesome. It does look like we have another one. Joshua asked, is Axon a subscription-based service? And so Axon is our SaaS platform. It's our cloud native alternative to our LR7 on-prem. So if that's something that you're interested in, want to see a demo, want to get some more information, definitely reach out, and we're happy to show it to you, show you what it can do, see how it might work for you. But yes, it's our newer cloud native SaaS platform. And someone did make a very good point here as well. It looks like they mentioned that backups are a really good call, but also playbooks that kind of establish that plan of action, so no one has to ask what to do next. They mentioned, in a security event, you're not always calm, and that is 100% correct. So yeah, anything standardized that you might have as far as steps to follow are definitely good things to have. And I can definitely, speak to that in an incident response scenario. So yes, playbooks are fantastic, and having those steps to follow are a really, really good thing to implement as well.
I would also like to add on to playbooks. We had a presentation back in Rhythm World where we talked about playbooks. Playbooks help a lot in time efficiency. So in the context of, say, a ransomware attack, in reality, you're not necessarily going to be the most calm, especially in the healthcare sector. In one of our slides, we mentioned how there was a 6-week outage. When you're going through an outage, you don't have access to medical files, you don't have access to any digital automation. The last thing you're going to be is calm. And in the context of a healthcare industry, a lot of staff members aren't very keen or aware of certain cybersecurity protocols to take upon. So having a playbook in this context helps a lot, just to immediately remediate or at least stall and halt the situation before it becomes more advanced. So playbooks help in time efficiencies because we're not all, engineers in the space or vulnerability remediators and whatnots. Some of us are nurses, some of us are lab technicians. So having a playbook that's accessible in the context of an attack helps a lot to at least report the event. Some folks are not aware that you're supposed to report this immediately as soon as you witness it. So having a playbook on how to respond to it, how to be the liaison, how to remediate, how to halt helps a lot in time efficiency. So great point. Great.
Definitely. All right. I think that's all I'm seeing in as far as questions go. What Mikiann, did you have anything else you wanted to add before we wrap this up and hand it back over to Delaney?
I'm all good on my end. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you both so much for that presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us today. If you do think of any other questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@logrhythm.com, or you can always connect with us on any of our social media platforms. Again, be sure to check out the attachments section. There's some related blogs and content that we've linked there. And yeah, thank you so much again, and thank you to our speakers. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.